The 18th birthday eviction. The trash bag gift. The sound of duct tape ripping is a sound I will never forget. It is loud, screeching, and violent. It was the first thing I heard when I woke up on the morning of my 18th birthday. I rolled over in my narrow twin bed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. For a split second, just a heartbeat, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe they were wrapping a present? Maybe after 18 years of being the other son, the spare part, my parents had finally decided to acknowledge me. Then my bedroom door flew open. My mother, Linda, stood there. She wasn't holding a cake. She was holding a box of black, heavy-duty trash bags. She threw the box onto my chest. It hit me with a thud that knocked the wind out of me. "Happy birthday, Leo," she said. Her voice wasn't warm. It was efficient, like she was checking an item off a grocery list. "You're 18, you're legally an adult. You have 1 hour to clear out." I sat up, blinking, the plastic box sliding into my lap. "What?" "We need the room." My father, Gary, appeared behind her. He was sipping coffee from a mug that said, "Number 1 Dad." He looked at his watch. "Actually, Caleb needs the room. His streaming setup is getting too big for the guest room. He needs a space for his brand." Caleb, my younger brother by 2 years, the golden child. The boy who got a PS5 when I got a pair of socks. The boy who was currently standing in the hallway, smirking, holding a tape measure. "It's nothing personal, bro," Caleb laughed, snapping the tape measure. "But your room has the best natural lighting. Plus, the Wi-Fi signal is stronger in this corner. You understand, right?" I looked at them. The 3 of them stood there like a wall of indifference. I looked around my room. The room I had slept in since I was 4 years old. The room where I had hidden from their arguments. Where I had studied late into the night to keep my scholarship grades. Where I had nursed my grandmother, Grandma Rose, in her final moments before she passed away 2 years ago. "You're a good boy, Leo," she would whisper to me in those final lucid moments. "You have a good heart. Don't let them harden it." I packed the box. I took one last look at the 4 walls that had been my sanctuary. "Time's up," Caleb shouted from the hallway. I walked out. As I passed the living room, I saw them sitting on the couch, watching TV. They didn't even look up. "Keys," my father said, holding out a hand without turning his head. I placed my house key in his palm. It felt cold. "Good luck, Leo," my mother said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Don't expect handouts, Leo. We're changing the locks at noon." I walked out the front door. The morning sun hit my face, but it didn't feel warm. I walked down the driveway, the 2 trash bags bumping against my legs. The neighbors were watching. Mrs. Higgins, walking her poodle, stopped and stared. She saw the happy 18th birthday banner my parents hadn't bothered to buy, replaced by the sight of their son being put out like garbage. I walked until the house was just a speck in the distance. Then I walked some more. I went to the only place that felt safe, the old park bench near the town library where Grandma used to take me to feed the ducks. I sat there for 3 hours. I watched the world go on. People went to work, kids played, and I sat there with my entire life in 2 plastic bags, homeless with $40 in my pocket. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Probably Caleb texting me a picture of my empty room. It buzzed again and again. A call. I looked at the screen. It was a local number I didn't know. "Hello?" I answered, my voice raspy. "This is Arthur Henderson. I was your grandmother's attorney. Is today your 18th birthday?" My heart skipped a beat. Mr. Henderson. I remembered him. A stern man in a tweed suit who used to visit Grandma Rose on Sundays to play chess. "Yes," I said. "It is. Happy birthday, Leo. I've been waiting for this day. I have a package for you. A file, actually. Your grandmother left strict instructions that it was only to be opened on the day you became a legal adult." I can't really come to an office right now," I said, looking at my trash bags. "I'm sort of in between places." "I know," Henderson said. His voice softened, losing his professional edge. "Where are you?" "The park, by the library." "Stay there. I'm 5 minutes away." Mr. Henderson arrived in a silver sedan. He didn't look at my trash bags with pity. He looked at them with a grim sort of validation. He sat down next to me on the bench and placed a thick manila envelope on his lap. "Rose passed away 2 years ago, Leo," Henderson began. "Your parents immediately filed for probate. They assumed, naturally, that as the next of kin, the house and the estate went to them." "They live there," I said. "It's their house." "They live there," Henderson corrected, a small, sharp smile playing on his lips. "But it is not their house." He pulled out a document with a blue cover. It looked old. "Your grandmother was diagnosed with dementia, Leo, but she was lucid enough in the early stages to know what was coming. She knew your parents. She knew they were opportunistic. She knew that if she left the house to them, you would be pushed aside. She saw how they treated you." He handed me the document. She created a living trust. The title of the property at 42 Oakwood Drive was never transferred to your parents. It was held in the trust. I looked at the legal jargon. It was dense, but one line stood out in bold letters. Beneficiary, Leo Sterling. The terms of the trust are simple, Henderson explained. Your parents were granted right of habitation solely as your guardians. They were allowed to live there solely to provide a roof over your head. That right expires the moment you turn 18. I looked up at him, the air leaving my lungs. So technically, Henderson finished, his eyes twinkling, your parents are currently trespassing. And since they kicked you out, I believe they violated the only clause that allowed them to stay. He checked his watch. It's 11:30 a.m. You said they were changing the locks at noon? Yes. Henderson stood up and buttoned his jacket. He looked like a general preparing for battle. Well then, Leo, grab your bags. I think we should go home. I'll call the sheriff on the way. We have an eviction to serve. The drive back to 42 Oakwood Drive felt like a fever dream. I sat in the passenger seat of Arthur Henderson's sedan, clutching the blue folder like a shield. Behind us, the sheriff's cruiser followed, its presence a silent, heavy promise in the rearview mirror. Remember, Leo, Mr. Henderson said, turning onto my street, you don't have to argue with them. You don't have to justify yourself. You are the owner. They are the intruders. Let the law do the talking. We pulled up to the curb at 11:55 a.m. The scene in the driveway was almost comical in its cruelty. A white van marked Al's Locksmith and Security was parked right behind my father's truck. A man in blue coveralls was already at the front door, drilling into the deadbolt. My father, Gary, stood with his arms crossed, supervising. My mother, Linda, was sweeping the front porch, literally sweeping away the dust of my existence. Caleb was sitting on the hood of his car, blasting music, scrolling on his phone. They looked happy. They looked relieved. Henderson put the car in park. Showtime. We stepped out. The sheriff, a tall man named Officer Miller, stepped out of his cruiser and adjusted his belt. My father saw me first. His face crumpled into a look of pure disgust. He marched down the driveway, waving his hand as if shooing away a stray dog. I told you, Leo, he shouted, loud enough for the locksmith to hear. No handouts. You don't get to come crawling back just because the real world is scary. We're changing the locks right now. You're done here. He stopped when he saw the suit-clad man beside me. Then he stopped dead when he saw Officer Miller walking up the lawn. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Is there a problem, officer? Did he steal something? I told him to take his trash, but if he took anything valuable, you can book him. Mr. Gary Sterling, Henderson asked, stepping forward smoothly. Yeah? Who are you? I'm Arthur Henderson, attorney for the estate of Rose Sterling. My mother froze mid-sweep. The broom clattered to the porch. She knew the name. Rose's estate is settled, my father spat, though he looked less confident now. She died 2 years ago. We're the next of kin. This is our house. Actually, Henderson said, pulling the documents from his briefcase with the precision of a swordsman drawing a blade. It isn't, and it never was. He walked past my father, up the driveway, toward the locksmith. Excuse me, sir, Henderson called out to the workman. Please stop drilling. You're modifying private property without the owner's consent. I hired him, my father roared, chasing after us. I'm the owner. Officer Miller, Henderson said, not turning around. Would you please explain the concept of criminal trespass to Mr. Sterling while I explain the title deed? Officer Miller stepped in front of my father, his hand resting casually on his vest. Calm down, sir. Let's hear what the lawyer has to say. Caleb hopped off the car, his phone recording now. Yo, what is going on? Leo brought the cops on mom and dad? We gathered on the porch. My mother was pale, my father was red, Caleb was confused, and I just stood there, holding the folder. Henderson handed the deed to my father. This is a copy of the living trust established by Rose Sterling. As you can see, the title to this property was transferred to the trust 5 years ago. Upon her death, the trust dictated that the property would be held for the sole benefit of her grandson, Leo Sterling. That's not true, my mother stammered. She told us we could live here. Read Clause 4, Section B. Henderson pointed a manicured finger at the paper. I watched my father's eyes scan the page. I saw the exact moment the words hit him. His mouth opened, then closed. Right of habitation, Henderson read aloud for the benefit of the locksmith and Caleb. Gary and Linda Sterling are granted temporary license to occupy the premises solely for the purpose of providing a stable home for the beneficiary, Leo Sterling, until he reaches the majority of age. Should the beneficiary be removed from the home, or should the guardians fail to provide housing for him, this license is immediately revoked. Henderson snapped the folder shut. You kicked him out at 8 a.m. It is now noon. By ejecting the beneficiary, you violated the only condition allowing you to be here. Your right to inhabit this house expired 4 hours ago." The silence was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. That's a technicality," my father shouted, crumbling the paper. "We raised him. We paid the bills." "You paid the utilities," I spoke up for the first time. My voice didn't shake. "Grandma's trust paid the property taxes and the insurance. I saw the mail. You guys just lived here rent-free." "You ungrateful little brat," my mother hissed, lunging toward me. "After everything we did?" Officer Miller stepped in between us. "Ma'am, step back." "This is my house," she screamed. "I painted these walls. I planted those flowers." "And now you are trespassing," Henderson said coldly. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, you have been served. Since you were so eager to enforce a 1-hour move-out policy for Leo, I think it's only fair we adhere to your timeline." Henderson looked at the sheriff. "Officer Miller, these individuals are unlawfully occupying my client's property. They have effectively made themselves squatters as of this morning." "You can't kick us out," Caleb yelled, dropping his cool guy act. "Where am I going to sleep? My streaming setup is in there." "The same place Leo was going to sleep, I imagine. The park is nice this time of year." My father looked at the locksmith, desperate for an ally. "Al, just change the damn locks. I'm paying you." The locksmith, a burly guy who looked like he just wanted to go to lunch, looked at the deed in Henderson's hand, then at the sheriff, then at my father. "Sorry, buddy, I can't touch the door if you ain't the owner. License could get revoked." He turned to me. "You the owner, kid?" I looked at my parents. I saw the fear in their eyes, the realization that the power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had flipped upside down. They weren't angry anymore, they were terrified. "Yes," I said, "I am." "You want me to change the locks?" the locksmith asked. I looked at my father's keychain hanging from his belt, the keys to my house. "Yes," I said, "change them all, front door, back door, and the garage." "You can't do this, Leo," my mother pleaded, the tears starting now. The fake, manipulative tears she used whenever she wanted her way. "We raised you. It was just tough love. We were trying to help you grow up." It worked. I grew up fast, specifically in the last 4 hours. I turned to Officer Miller. "I want them removed. Now." "You heard the man," Miller said, hitching up his belt. "Folks, you need to vacate the premises. You can contact a lawyer to arrange a time to collect your belongings under supervision, but right now you need to leave." "My stuff is in there," Caleb whined. "My PS5. "Consider it collateral for the 18 years of emotional damages you might be sued for later." My father looked like he was going to punch someone, but he was a bully, not a fighter. He looked at the gun on Miller's hip and deflated. "Fine, we'll go to a hotel. We'll fight this in court. You'll see, Leo, you'll be begging us for help when the property tax bill comes." "The trust covers the taxes, Dad," I said calmly. "Grandma thought of everything." That was the final blow. He grabbed my mother's arm. "Let's go. We don't need to stand here and be insulted by a thief." They marched to their cars. They didn't have trash bags. They didn't have clothes. They just had the clothes on their backs and their arrogance. I watched them back out of the driveway. Caleb flipped me off as they drove away. The locksmith fired up his drill. "Whirr." "That sound," Henderson said, standing beside me, on the porch. "That is the sound of justice, Leo." "It sounds expensive," I said, a nervous laugh escaping me. "Don't worry," Henderson said, handing me another envelope from his briefcase. "This is the access to the trust's liquid assets. Rose left you a stipend for maintenance and living expenses. It's substantial." I looked at the locksmith drilling into the wood, the same wood my mother had tried to sweep me off of. "Mr. Henderson, call me Arthur." "Arthur," I said. "What happens when they come back for their stuff?" "We let them in," Arthur said, his eyes narrowing. "But Leo, I think it's time we talk about the improvements they made to the house, specifically the ones they made by destroying your grandmother's vintage rose garden to put in a hot tub." I smiled. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. "Can we throw the hot tub out?" "Leo," Arthur smiled, "it's your house. You can throw the whole family out." As the first new key was cut, I walked into the living room. It was quiet. The TV was off. My parents' coffee mugs were still on the table, half full. I picked up the mugs. I walked to the kitchen, and I dropped them into the trash bin, right on top of the granola bar wrapper I had eaten for breakfast before being evicted. Clunk. Happy birthday to me. The silence in a house that used to be a war zone is a strange thing. It has a weight to it. For the first 2 days, I just walked around. I didn't sleep in the master bedroom. That still felt like theirs. I slept on the couch in the living room, waking up every few hours expecting to hear my father yelling or Caleb screaming at his video games. But there was nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator and the wind in the chimney. Arthur, I couldn't call him Mr. Henderson anymore, had hired a forensic accountant. Apparently, Grandma Rose hadn't just left the house, she left the maintenance fund. My parents were supposed to use it for repairs and taxes. Arthur suspected they had been using it as a personal piggy bank. On Saturday morning, the collection was scheduled. I sat on the front porch swing, the one my mother claimed she bought, but which the receipts showed was paid for by the trust. Beside me sat Arthur, sipping tea from a thermos, looking like a shark in a cardigan. Two off-duty police officers, hired by the estate, stood by the gate. At 9 a.m. sharp, a beat-up U-Haul truck rumbled down the street. My father was driving. My mother was in the passenger seat. Caleb was squeezed in the middle, looking miserable. They pulled up. They looked smaller. In just 3 days, the arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a frantic, desperate energy. They were staying at a Motel 6 on the highway, according to Arthur. It was a steep drop from 42 Oakwood Drive. My father slammed the truck door. "We're here for our property. Don't try anything, Leo." "Good morning, Gary," Arthur said pleasantly. "The officers are here to ensure a peaceful transfer. You have 4 hours. You may take clothing, personal toiletries, and items purchased with your own personal income. Anything attached to the house, fixtures, appliances, stays." "My streaming setup," Caleb shouted, pushing past his dad. "I need my PC. I'm losing subscribers." "Go get it," I said, "if you bought it." They stormed into the house like locusts. I followed them inside, Arthur shadowing me. The living room was stripped in minutes. They took the TV, the throw pillows, even the batteries out of the remote. It was petty, but I let it go. Then we went upstairs. I watched Caleb kick open the door to his room, the master guest suite. He went straight for his desk. He started unplugging his massive 3-monitor setup, the neon lights, the microphone arm. "Hold on," Arthur said, consulting a clipboard. "What now?" Caleb snapped, clutching a keyboard. "We audited the trust's expenses from 2021 to present. There are several withdrawals labeled Home Office Upgrade for Schooling, totaling $4,000. The dates match the purchase of these monitors and that tower." Caleb froze. So, Arthur continued, calm as ice, "trust funds are for the maintenance of the home or the education of the beneficiary, Leo. You are not Leo. Therefore, this equipment was purchased with stolen funds. It belongs to the trust." "You can't be serious," my father yelled from the hallway, carrying a box of shoes. "It's a computer. Let the boy have it." "He can have it," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "if you write a check for $4,000 right now to reimburse the trust." My father's face turned purple. I knew he didn't have $4,000. He probably didn't have 400. "Put it down, Caleb," my father growled. "Dad, no," Caleb whined, his voice cracking. "My career." "Put it down." Caleb slammed the keyboard onto the desk. He looked at me with pure hatred. "I hope you choke on it." "I don't game, Caleb. I'll probably donate it to the library. They need new computers." The rest of the morning was a systematic dismantling of their lives. My mother tried to take the antique china from the hutch. "Grandma Rose's," I said. She put it back. My father tried to take the expensive riding lawnmower from the garage. "Purchased with the landscape maintenance fund," Arthur noted. He put it back. By noon, the U-Haul was filled with clothes, cheap IKEA furniture, and boxes of knickknacks. The expensive items, the things they had flaunted to the neighbors, the things they had bought with money meant for me, remained in the house. They stood in the driveway, sweaty and defeated. "Are we done?" My father spat, wiping his forehead. "Can we leave this hellhole?" "One last thing," Arthur said. He pulled a document from his briefcase. "The damage assessment." He handed it to my father. "We had a contractor do a walkthrough yesterday. The holes in the drywall in Caleb's room, the water damage in the basement you never fixed, and most egregiously, the removal of the vintage rose garden to install a hot tub that wasn't properly permitted." "The hot tub increases the value," my mother argued weakly. "It leaked and rotted the deck," I corrected. "It's going to cost $5,000 to remove it and fix the wood." "The total damages come to roughly $25,000, Arthur stated. "We're deducting this from the small savings account Rose left in your name for emergencies, which I might add is now empty." "You're stealing our money?" my mother shrieked. "No," Arthur smiled. "I'm settling your debt, and frankly, you're getting off light. We could sue you for the unauthorized spending of the trust, which amounts to over 6 figures. But Leo has decided to be generous." Arthur turned to me. I looked at my parents. They looked old. They looked tired. And for the first time, I realized they weren't the giants I had feared my whole life. They were just small, greedy people who got caught. "I'm not suing you," I said. "I don't want to see you in court. I don't want to see you at all." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single envelope. It contained $2,000 in cash, my own savings from mowing lawns, the money I had when they kicked me out. I held it out to my father. "Leo, no," Arthur warned quietly. It's okay, Arthur, I said. This isn't charity, it's severance. My father looked at the cash. His pride warred against his greed. Greed won. He snatched the envelope from my hand. This doesn't fix anything, he muttered, not meeting my eyes. I know. That's for a security deposit on an apartment, because if you ever step foot on this property again, if you ever call me or text me or try to guilt me, I will have Arthur file those forensic accounting charges, and you won't go to a hotel, you'll go to jail. I looked at Caleb. That goes for you too. Stay away. My father shoved the money into his pocket. He didn't say thank you, he didn't say sorry. He just turned around, climbed into the U-Haul, and started the engine. My mother lingered for a second. She looked at the house, then at me. "Where are your family, Leo?" she whispered, the manipulation reflex still twitching. "Doesn't that mean anything?" "Yeah," I said, looking at the rose bushes she had destroyed, now just patches of dirt. "It means you should have treated me better." She turned and got into the truck. I stood on the porch with Arthur and watched them drive away. The U-Haul turned the corner and disappeared. The silence returned, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt light. It felt like oxygen. "Well," Arthur said, closing his briefcase, "that went better than expected. They took the bait." "The bait?" "The cash," Arthur grinned. "By accepting that money, they implicitly agreed to the terms of your verbal contract. Take the money, stay away, or face prosecution. It's a settlement." I laughed. I actually laughed. "So what now?" I asked. Arthur looked at the house. "Now, you fix the deck, you paint the walls a color you like, you go to college." He patted my shoulder. "Now, Leo, you start your life." I walked back inside. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took a soda. I walked into the living room, sat on the floor where the couch used to be, and looked out the big bay window. The sun was shining on the driveway. It was empty. I took a sip of the soda. It tasted like victory.